Monday, September 2nd. A holiday in the United States, but in Europe, just another day of the war. London had another air raid alarm this morning after a 17-hour lull, but German planes raided many other English cities during the night. And British planes attacked Berlin and Munich and Sardinia, Italy's big airplane base between Italy and Spain, and the Varese industrial district of northwest Italy. Now the news direct from Europe, Berlin, London, and Rome. First, a report from the German capital by Edwin Hartridge.
This is Berlin. Last night we had another air raid, or an air raid alarm for Berlin. Because apparently no bombs were dropped in the city or in the suburbs, and little anti-aircraft fire was heard. The German news agency this morning reports that British planes attempted to raid the German capital, but were driven back by anti-aircraft fire. No bombs dropped on the city. The raid lasted about 45 minutes. This morning on my way to the studio, I passed two mementos of Saturday night's air raid. Several bombs fell in the pier garden, and they failed to explode. Now the bombs are covered up with earth, sandbags, and straw mattresses. For there is the fear that they might be delayed fuse bombs, which sometimes go off hours or even days after they have landed. The area in the vicinity of the bombs is roped off so that no pedestrians can get near them. The delicate job of handling dead bombs has created new jobs for prisoners in concentration camps. For those prisoners who volunteer for this work, there are special rewards. They apply to join the special bomb squads, and provided they are not killed in the work, they are then released to the concentration camps. This morning, there is news that the German Air Force is continuing its attacks against England. The official agency reports that in the early hours of this morning, German bombers took off from military targets in southeast England. There have been fierce air battles reported between the British planes and the raiders, but at this moment, no further details are available in Berlin to the aerial battlefield. Also, we have no information at this end whether London is one of the objectives in the day's operations. News about the air raids seems to be the dominant theme both in conversations and in the press. And along this line, I might report that the blackout seems to be getting blacker this last week. Whether this is due to a change in the weather or what, I don't know. However, the police have created special patrols which spend their time at night checking on all quarters of the city for violations of the blackout regulations. And the punishment for each offense is something unique. Every time a household or an individual is found guilty, the electricity is shut off for a period of 8 days. This seems to be a very practical punishment for demonstrating that a blackout should be just that. Dr. Goebbels made a speech at Katowice yesterday evening, marking the first anniversary of the Polish campaign. His main point was to assure his listeners that the long talk about planning offensive against England would start, and I quote, at the decisive hour to be determined by the Fuhrer. Dr. Goebbels then went on to say that German people were more united than ever before, that they had the best and most gallant army in the field, which piled up one victory after another, and that Germany was now immune against the British blockade and against starvation. The propaganda minister added that Germany was also immune against the poison of British lies. He said that, quote, everywhere in the world, the clear, the most objective and true reports of German news have proved to be successful against British lies. England is alone. England cherishes the vain hope that it can conceal itself by hiding in the autumn mist. The Fuhrer will attack when the right hour has come. End of quote. The magazine Neues Volk, published by the Racial Political Office of the National Socialist Party, lays down some principles so that the German or Nordic Aryan race may be kept pure. German people are advised that the birth rate must increase, so that in another 20 years, Germany will not have to call on foreign labor. Secondly, labor must be recruited only from Germanic people, so that the elements of the East will be eliminated. And thirdly, as long as Germany must be, quote, obliged to resort to the people of other races, especially the Slavs, every German man and woman has the duty to avoid association with them. The same principles must be applied to the foreigners of other races. This is Edwin Hartridge, returning now to Columbia in New York.
This is New York. Here's a dispatch from Vichy, France. Reports described as authoritative say that British planes today dropped 12 bombs on the center of Chartres. an important German air base in occupied France. The bombs are said to have missed the famous Chartres Cathedral by 400 feet. It also is said that the port and railroad station at Boulogne and the port and airfield at Cherbourg were damaged by British bombers. Now the latest news reported from the British capital by Eric Severide. Go ahead, London.
This is London. London was just going back to work this morning when the air raid sirens went off again, around 8 o'clock. This alarm lasted something less than an hour. When it was over, news messages reported that a formation of bombers had tried to reach London from the southeast, but were broken up. They ran into a heavy anti-aircraft barrage, and 3 were reported knocked down. British fighters then attacked the main formation of Germans and destroyed 2 more. Where the bombs were dropped, we don't yet know. That was the 20th air raid alarm London has had since a week ago yesterday. They have lasted a total of 33 hours. At that rate, if one dutifully stayed in his shelter, he would lose more than 1 day a week just taking cover. Among this morning's raiders were 2 very large 4-engine German planes. The first of these new planes were sighted yesterday. We have no details of last night's RAF raid on Berlin except a brief agency message. It was the 6th raid over the German capital in 8 days. There were alarms in Switzerland, and planes were reported traveling south. And the Italian communique that's just come to London says British bombers are over northern Italy again. Out on the Isle of Man in the Irish Sea, hundreds of German nationals are interned in camps. They have now had their first air raid alarm. A German bomber approached the island, and the prisoners went to cover, but a Spitfire is believed to have shot down the raider. Prime Minister Churchill believes Britain is winning the war in the air. He said so in a message of congratulations sent to the bomber squadrons of the RAF. He said, I quote, "Command of the air is being gradually and painfully, but nonetheless remorselessly, wrested from the Nazi criminals who hope by this means to terrorize and dominate European civilization," unquote. He compared British bombing crews who bring back their bombs from Berlin when they can't see their targets with what he called the wanton cruelty of German flyers. They, he said, have wrecked nearly 1,000 homes and shops in the resort town of Ramsgate. Another British town received heavy damage in one of yesterday's raids. This was a town in the Thames estuary. 30 to 40 heavy bombs are reported to have fallen right across the heart of the city. The planes apparently were after the docks, but they dropped their load before they could reach them because of fighter interception. By tonight, or tomorrow morning, all the 320 British children from the torpedoed liner, which was taking them to Canada, will be back home with their families. They were 2 nights at sea after the torpedoing, without heavy clothes, but most of them, they tell us, want to make another start for Canada. The London press this morning prints the whole story, but there's a noticeable lack of editorial indignation about the affair. I think most British people were not greatly surprised. They've had a feeling that something like this was bound to happen sooner or later. And the story doesn't even make the front pages of the afternoon papers at all. British civilians are developing the same state of mind about German flyers that we saw among the French and Belgians. In northern France, when a man came down in a parachute, the gendarmes had to race the farmers and village women to the victim in order to protect his life. Yesterday, a British crowd in an unpleasant mood closed in on a flyer who had just bailed out. He was saved by a bus driver, and very fortunately, because he turned out to be English. War correspondents of London papers in Egypt report this morning that the British and Italian armies on the western desert border are poised for action. They still expect Mussolini to ring up the curtain for a general attack from Libya when the weather turns cool. Intelligence reports of new Italian transport parts and camouflage supply dumps and masked men and guns in remote ravines are coming into the British command every day. And while more areas of French Central Africa are coming over to General de Gaulle, we're getting reports of additional French flyers joining the British. They come from the French Moroccan airport. Spanish reports say 19 French warplanes have flown into Gibraltar from North Africa in the last month. 4 French bombers and a fighter landed yesterday at the Rock, and 2 seaplanes the day before. This is London. I return you to CBS, New York.
This is New York, and here's the latest news from the Balkans. Bucharest reports say that police have been ordered to take stern measures against street demonstrators after a warning by Germany and Italy that the angry demonstrations protesting the transfer of Transylvanian territory from Romania to Hungary must be stopped. Now the latest news from the Italian capital, reported by Cecil Brown. Go ahead, Rome.
This is Rome. British planes last night raided northern Italy and the island of Sardinia. The Italian High Command announced that the raiders dropped numerous bombs at random in the country areas of Sardinia. The communique reports that 3 of these British bombers were shot down by anti-aircraft fire. There were no casualties, says the bulletin, and no material damage. Other British bombers coming from the direction of Switzerland raided Piedmont and Lombardy. The High Command says they were met with the prompt intervention of anti-aircraft batteries and crisis fighter planes. The bulletin says the British found it impossible to reach their intended objectives, so they dropped 4 bombs on a village in the Borese district. There were no casualties and no appreciable damage to buildings. 2 Italian reconnaissance planes have not returned to their bases. The communique reports that in a British raid over Tobruk in Libya, which we announced yesterday, a field hospital was hit by British bombs. One of the patients was seriously wounded. Anti-aircraft guns of the Royal Italian Navy brought down one of the British raiders over Tobruk. Royal Air Force planes also struck at Italian bases in East Africa. In an attack on the island of Harmil in the Red Sea and 80 miles from Massawa, one of the British planes was shot down. Its crew of 3 was taken prisoner. And still another British plane was reported shot down during a raid on Assad in Eritrea. The communique adds that there was slight material damage and 8 wounded, including Italians and natives. The only Italian offensive action reported today took place in the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. The High Command says that Italian planes have successfully attacked an enemy troop encampment with shrapnel bombs and machine gun fire. The encampment is south of Murmun, beyond Kasara. Kasara, you recall, is now an Italian outpost 18 miles from the border of Ethiopia. And you may recall a few days ago, the Italians repulsed a British attack on Eritrea at the wells of Adardé. At the time, they reported 10 Australians left dead on the field. Well, today, this figure was placed at 22 dead. In addition, an armored car was captured. The box score in the operations today shows 6 British planes shot down, 2 Italian machines missing. We have no reports in the papers here of disturbances in Romania against giving up Transylvania. The Rome newspaper Messaggero gives a hint that there may have been some trouble. The paper quotes the Romanian Minister of the Interior as saying that a few demonstrations of a political character had been allowed, but they were now forbidden. On the other hand, the Romanian newspapers are quoted here as saying that the force of circumstances was stronger than the Romanian wishes about Transylvania. The impression here in Rome is that whatever the attitude of the Romanian people may be at the moment, the arbitration is an accomplished fact. In other words, Romania has been partitioned and she will remain partitioned. The Popolo di Roma reports today that the whereabouts of King George is a mystery. It carries a story from Bern, Switzerland to that effect. The Messaggero prints exactly the same story, word for word, but its story comes under a dateline of San Sebastian, Spain. The Messaggero headline puts it this way: the British capital is too dangerous for the nerves of King George. Mussolini's newspaper, the Popolo d'Italia, is renewing its campaign to keep jazz out of Italy. The paper says it is absolutely extraneous to the spirit and good taste of fascism. Moreover, it's pointed out that jazz is imported from the United States and Great Britain. The paper indicates that should be reason enough to bar such music. Let there be no more imitation of jazz, the paper adds. Let Italians dance to traditional Italian music. So if the Duce's paper has any influence with the authorities, then in this country, swinging jazz will soon be just another victim of the war. This is Cecil Brown in Rome. I return you now to CBS in New York.
And here's the news from Washington briefly. Official Washington is quiet today as the nation's leaders take a brief holiday rest. Labor rallies are to be held at various points, but only in the War Department is there a notable spurt of activity. Experts of this division are preparing to mobilize 60,500 National Guardsmen from 26 states into the Army of September 16th. The men are to be mustered for a year of military training. And for this news, Columbia concludes this regular morning report of European development. Edwin Hartridge spoke from Berlin, Eric Severide reported from London, and Cecil Brown from Rome.
Here is the Midnight News, and this is Alvar Liddell reading it. Up to 10 o'clock, 175 German aircraft had been destroyed in today's raids over this country. Today was the most costly for the German Air Force for nearly a month. In daylight raids, between 350 and 400 enemy aircraft were launched in 2 attacks against London and southeast England. About half of them were shot down. It was officially announced that by 10 o'clock tonight, 175 raiders were known to have been destroyed by our fighters and anti-aircraft gunners.
At the moment we can see 2 bright flashes, 3 flashes from the other side of the channel, and 3 great puffs of smoke, another 4th. And any moment now the shells will be arriving over this side. 4 columns of smoke going up on the far side as the convoy goes past us here. And there's the first explosion. And the second. Just a very short way in front of us to see here. Tremendous column of water goes up. There's a 3rd bomb just come down now. And there's one more to come, and there it is. All those 4 completely wide of the convoy, as they've all been so far, as the convoy steams past us slowly here. From each of those places where you heard those tremendous explosions, there's a great swirl of water goes up, a cloud of smoke and spray in the air still. It's an extraordinary feeling as you see the flash right over on the far side of the coast, and then the little column of smoke goes up from it. And then we wait for the explosion over this side.
September 20th, the news of Europe. At this time, and each evening at 6:45 Eastern Daylight Time, Columbia calls in its correspondents abroad for direct reports from the European capitals. Today we'll hear from Eric Severide in London, our correspondent in Berlin, and a report on developments in the nation's capital by Albert Warner. But while we're waiting for the shortwave report of Mr. Severide, here's the news from other points. In Rome, Germany's Foreign Minister von Ribbentrop will have another talk today with Mussolini. The pair had a first discussion yesterday, but so far there is no information as to what they discussed. Rome newspapers said that in talks between von Ribbentrop and Italy's own Foreign Minister, Count Ciano, southeastern Europe was a chief subject. Meanwhile, a communiqué in Rome says that British planes have staged intensive raids on major Italian bases in North Africa, but adds that in counterattack, the Italian planes sank a British steamer and a submarine. In Cairo, the British say that no major engagement has yet taken place with the Italians, but that British tanks are causing sharp losses in the ranks of Italian mechanized forces. In the Far East, new tension has cropped up. Japan has made sudden and unexplained demands on French Indochina for bases which geographically have no importance in the war with China. There are reports that the French government will refuse these demands. And now for the report of Eric Severide in the British capital. Go ahead, London.
This is London. The sirens have gone only once so far this morning, and I haven't heard yet any bombs or shooting. Some fighters were up over the city for a time, and we've just been informed by the ministry that German raiders were driven back before they reached the city. We had pretty bad weather over London most of the night, so we didn't take as heavy a bombing as we usually get. It was bad weather down on the channel also, so the invasion ships were idle, while the RAF gave them another very severe punishing with high explosives. Reports from Dover now say the rough weather there shows some signs of getting worse in the next few days. That's about all that can be said of the expected invasion, of which Britishers talk less and less as the days go by. One thing is certain, if the Germans don't come, many British Army officers are going to be very disappointed men. They are sure they could beat it, and fairly sure that if they did, Hitler would go down. The Air Ministry communique just issued reported that RAF bombers successfully attacked communications in Germany, including the Dortmund-Ems Canal, besides several ports and aerodromes in enemy-occupied territory. We haven't got the whole picture yet of last night's raids over London. There were fewer planes and longer intervals between shelling from the ground. But as usual, the all clear did not sound until dawn. I heard about 5 high explosives in my neighborhood, and a number of incendiaries were whooshing past at intervals. They sound like a branch falling to soft ground. One landed on the roof opposite my bedroom window and made no sound at all when it landed. Unless they hit highly inflammable material, they're quite easy to put out. It took just 3 buckets of water for this one with a hand pump and 1 bucket of sand. This bomb was lodged in those sloping roof tiles. When we could pick it up, it turned out to be just a thin cylinder about 1.5 feet long and 2 inches wide. Those bombs, I think, were dropped in clusters. 2 landed in the street, 1 in my courtyard, another on a second apartment house, and 2 or 3 1 street away. And the difficulty about these light fire bombs is that very often people, who are mostly underground anyway, don't hear them fall. And while they may be gazing at one fire across, another is secretly building up behind them. So far as I can see this morning, all fires in London are now out. At least one of the raiders was brought down last night in Surrey, and it crashed on a housetop next to a hospital. As it came screaming down in the darkness, one of the crew bailed out and was immediately captured. An anti-aircraft shell had made a direct hit on the plane. One factory in the East End was set on fire, and that was about the most important damage of the night. In the North End of London, a high-explosive bomb landed squarely on the emergency escape door of a public shelter, and a number of sleeping persons were instantly killed. It's reported this morning that the London raiders last night came in from a new direction, the northwest, and it was obvious that they were flying very low. There was a searchlight barrage from central London, and we're told night fighters went up for a time. One hospital in Essex was set on fire by an incendiary. Another bomb started small fires in the Surrey woods, which were much too wet last night to burn very readily. One report says a raider machine gun streets in a northwest suburb. Every morning now we hear a time bomb going off somewhere around the West End. One exploded 80 yards away from the Duke of Kent yesterday when he was sitting in his car, on which the dirt and rubble descended, but he wasn't hurt. Every day trucks speed through the streets carrying a time bomb to the open country. I know a traffic policeman near my house who stopped one of those trucks on its perilous errand. He's a big policeman who learned how to silence even the toughest truck drivers years ago with a few well-chosen words. But he tells me now that he has lost all confidence in himself after that experience, and if it weren't for the war, he'd think about retiring to the country. I return you now to CBS New York.
That was London. Here in New York, a dispatch from Honolulu. Admiral James O. Richardson, Commander-in-Chief of the United States Fleet, will leave for the United States Monday in the battleship New Mexico, it was understood today. And the battleship Idaho and several other ships were expected to leave also. And next, the report from the German capital. Go ahead, Berlin.
This is Berlin. Again last night, we had no air raid here. Whether the British bombers attacked other places in Germany last evening has not yet been made known. But they did not visit Berlin, though it was a fairly clear moonlight night, one of those nights when there's nothing you can do to hide a great city from enemy airmen. Everyone I know in Berlin has now caught up with his sleep. For about a fortnight, the British did come over almost every night, and you did lose sleep. But there have been no alarms since Sunday, so everyone is feeling normal again. 2 weeks ago, the chief air warden suggested that the population of Berlin set their alarm clocks for around midnight. Then when the bombers arrived and you had to make for the cellar, you didn't feel as bad as when the screaming siren suddenly awakened you, and you had to hurry, or the British would be over your rooftop. But the last few days, as one evening after another has passed peacefully, most people, I think, have given up the idea of that midnight alarm clock and have simply slept the night through. The German press this morning is still full of indignant headlines and articles against the British for the bombing of the children's hospital at Bethel night before last, when 9 children were killed and 12 injured. The official party newspaper, the Völkische Beobachter, has this banner headline this morning: "We will pay back without pity." The Berliner Mittag carries this front page headline this noon: "It will be mercilessly revenged. Churchill's night of murder at Bethel was carefully planned." This paper, in an editorial, calls the British flyers barbarians and their deed a shameful act of murder, and warns that the reprisal of the German Air Force will be a hard one. The software block remarks this morning that it is well known that there are many more important objectives in the West End shopping district of London. It says, quote, the shopping district of London's West End, in which, as is well known, there are many more important objectives, is being continually hit with bombs. A bomb crashed through several stories of a West London hotel, unquote. The German radio this morning says that H.R. Knickerbocker, whom it calls a notorious German hater, had to report from London that the English were gradually losing their cheerfulness as a result of the German bombings. I guess I'll have to refer you to Rome for concrete news of the results of Herr von Ribbentrop's visit. We have no concrete news of it here. But the Berlin press does lift the veil enough this morning to indicate that two subjects were paramount in the talks. The Völkische Beobachter, for instance, tells us that the talks were mainly concerned with discussing the problems which will arise in Europe and Africa after Great Britain is beaten, and also the reconstruction of what it terms the new order, which the Axis powers count on setting up. The Völkische Beobachter also tells us, in connection with Ribbentrop's talks with Mussolini, that the attitude of the Spanish people in the decisive phase of the struggle with England amounts to a Spanish declaration of solidarity with the Axis powers. News of last night's German air attacks is scanty here this morning. We're told that London was again bombed and that German attacks were also made on armament factories and industrial works in southern and central Britain last night. This is William L. Shirer in Berlin. I return you now to CBS in New York.
That was William L. Shirer in Berlin. And now, the report of Albert L. Warner in our nation's capital. We take you now to Washington.
There is now reaching the point of decision within the administration the transfer of some 40 flying fortresses to Great Britain. The wholesale German bombing of London and the destruction of civilian lives and property have given momentum to the proposal. There's plenty of indication here that War Department opinion already has been sounded out, and that the National Defense Commission has been consulted, and the potential reaction of isolationists in Congress taken into account. At present, the Army has on hand or immediately available 50 to 75 of these huge bombing planes. The flying fortresses can travel some 4,000 miles with a good-sized load. Their speed in the original models was 250 miles per hour. Now it's been brought up to over 300 miles an hour. There's no doubt of their value to the British Air Force. They could leave Newfoundland one evening and be on British soil the next. They could range the whole extent of Germany, striking even at arms factories in Czechoslovakia. But it takes 2 years to build a flying fortress. Some officers in the War Department have raised the question of whether it would be wise from the standpoint of our own defense to send these planes to Britain. The old issue arises, and the same answer which has been made on previous occasions is again set forth. Namely, that the maintenance of British sea and air strength forms the best initial protection to the United States. Several administration senators already have taken the lead in publicly supporting the transfer of flying fortresses. Now the Assistant Republican Leader of the Senate, Warren Austin, indicates his sympathy. He tells me there are two questions to be answered. Would those airplanes serve our own objective of self-defense more in Britain's hands than if we kept them here? And can we spare them, taking into consideration the possibility of sudden need? Those are matters of strategy, he said, matters for the General Staff. But, said Senator Austin, we ought to seize upon every opportunity to defend ourselves. We are on the defensive as we have never been before. The emergency is great. To the isolationists in Congress, the proposal seems one more step in what they think is a long series leading to involvement. Yet, the voice of isolationism was weak when American destroyers were transferred to Britain. These flying fortresses may also be connected directly or indirectly with a proposal to let the United States share Britain's naval bases in the Far East. Such American access to Singapore, will be another gesture to restrain Japan as it penetrates into French Indochina. But to isolationists, any linking of flying fortresses and Far East bases would merely serve to double the liability. The large-scale preparations for handling conscription continue in Washington, although no Selective Service director has yet been named. 2 persons have been mentioned for the command of the draft machinery, Major General Gullion and Lieutenant Colonel Hershey. From Republican quarters in Congress, there comes some muttering over the White House silence on a draft administrator. Representative Ditter, chairman of the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee, says, after all the pressure and clamor for speed when the measure was before Congress, it seems strange there should be a delay in selecting a man for the administrative job. There's a copy here of the questionnaire which the registrants in the draft have to fill out. The Census Bureau, by the way, says there are 16,404,000 men in the ages 21 to 35 who will be due to register October 16th. The questionnaire runs 8 pages. Your physical condition, your dependents, all the details of your occupation are required. The Selective Service headquarters is being swamped with questions. They say that although it has been made clear only single men are likely to be taken in the first draft, there are some wives writing in wanting to know how they can keep their husbands out, and others asking how they can get them in.
CBS has brought you reports from its correspondents in London, Berlin, and Washington. This morning, Eric Severide reported from London, William L. Shirer reported from Berlin, while Albert Warner was heard from Washington.
The time has come when we must make a choice. We can either resolve to protect our temples of liberty, or we can go blindly along, believing that all is well. If we follow the latter course, we will someday find our liberties suddenly blacked out by the tyranny of a foreign dictator. Our people are accustomed to taking liberty for granted. As a result, they have ceased to think seriously about it. But the foes of America have much to say about it. They construe liberty as a license and clamor for even greater license. Liberty and license are as far apart as liberty and tyranny. License breeds tyranny. In recent days, insidious forces have sought to obstruct our national preparedness campaign by proclaiming that the strengthening of our Army and Navy abrogates liberty. The communists, the bondsmen, and their allies of totalitarianism are seeking to weaken America's defense. These traitors who shout of liberty as they seek to destroy it tell our young people that they should refuse to take up their country's arms. Americanism is on trial. Its real test lies in the ability of red-blooded Americans to meet and to defeat the fifth column of destruction.